So this is a Ferruginous hawk, and there was like maybe one or two people that actually have ever heard of them. This is our largest hawk species in this country. A lot of people like to say buteo, which I've said that. Then I got to thinking, well, yeah, that's all we have accipiters, but even it's bigger than the accipiters, which is the forest dwelling hawks. So I'm just going to umbrella it, hawk. So this is our largest hawk species in this country. And it is also considered a specialist. So that means it's really picky where it lives. It's really picky what it eats. And I'm going to go into what that is in the future. Only will live in the open grasslands, prefers wide open grasslands, like almost nearly no trees, maybe a couple, PJ, juniper, pinyon habitat, but mostly it's just wide open prairie. So if you think of a prairie like in Kansas or somewhere, and there's just like one lone tree, or the prairies that we have here. And I'm going to show you where you can find these here, but I'll get to that later. And that lone nest or that lone tree is usually where they'll nest. They will nest on the cliff as well. And if they're really desperate, they're very comfortable on the ground, so they will nest on the ground. There's also a lot, it's a pretty high mortality. The northern, this is just to keep me on track, otherwise I'll just keep going. The northern population is migratory, but I put a little note somewhere. The migration is the least understood in this species of all the buteos. So buteos is the scientific name, so it's the part of the name that's the genus. So there's the buteos, those are all the soaring hawks, and then there's a little dot, then there's a species. So after that, you have the red tails, Ferruginuses, Swainsons, broadwings, zone tails, all of those. So those are the ones that you see soaring. The ones that you see sitting with the long tail, hunting your birds at the bird feeder, those are accipiters. We only have 3 species here in this country. The southern population is not migratory. This is exactly the same behavior that the golden eagles exhibit. Golden eagles don't migrate. Those that nest at the Canadian United States border, those that nest below that just kind of disperse. So this species is quite similar to the golden eagles, although they don't behave like one. A lot of falconers will get a Ferruginous hawk and think they're getting a miniature eagle. You're getting a big bird, but they don't act anything like an eagle. They act like an accipiter, really. This little thing goes. So the next one is this. So this is where they live in the whole North American. So lucky us, we get them year round. And I will do, now I got this from Cornell. I kind of know what they're doing. However, some of these maps are not always accurate, but they're pretty close. Yep, only found in wide open grasslands, and their favorite food, they must have ground squirrels and prairie dogs. So that's where you're going to find them. West, I think the highest population of Ferruginous is in Wyoming, which makes sense because without, Tetons, after that, it's all wide open prairie. So Arizona, this is where we are. This map is, I pulled from, there's like 3 or 4 organizations that come together, and that's from this joint effort. So 2 spots that I have personally seen a lot of Ferruginous hawks. So the one that's up on the top, the circle where all the green is. So the green is where they are year round, and then the winter is the blue. So they do go all the way down there. This is a cold weather species. They don't like the heat very much. So Yeah, so they'll go down there in the winter, but after that, they go back up north. So the top circle right there, I don't know if you can tell. So when you go down 40 and you hit, I think it's Ash Fork, and you go up towards Peach Springs, it opens up to a bunch of grassland. That is the most I've ever seen. And it's also the only place I've ever seen a wild dark morph. So, which I'll get into the morphs later. I feel like I'm like, spoiler alert, but, and then the other one is over there by, so you go Holbrook and then you go down towards Sholo, and it's wide open. There's a big wind farm, dry lake. I did eagle surveys out there, so I know they're out there. Yeah, so that's where I've seen them. So if you want to see them, they don't like people. Fortunately, she tolerates me. They can be quite a threat, which I do talk about that a little bit. Michele, do you mind repeating questions? Yeah, I'm gonna get, oh, dang it. Yeah, this was not a good idea. So he asked about wind farms, which I am going to get into in more detail later, but they are a problem, and for different reasons than you might think. And that includes golden eagles as well. So favorite food, they are a specialist. So this is almost exclusively what they will eat and what they prefer are ground squirrels and prairie dogs. And if they're desperate times, they'll do like, jackrabbits, cottontail, the little bitty moles, voles, mice, whatever, pocket gophers, which I don't know how they do that because I've got pocket gophers in my yard with the raptors, them sitting there, and I never see them. I was like, you guys are not doing a very good job. And I can always tell when one pops its head up because all the birds go bonkers. I was like, oh, a gopher must have decided to see what the weather was like.
Are they affected by plague that prairie dogs have?
They are here, yeah.
I mean, do the birds catch plague if they?
Oh no, we do though.
But it doesn't bother any birds.
No, usually things like that, like the plague. Now, there's always an exception to nature. I have never heard of a bird getting the plague, but usually most diseases, not all, are species specific. There's some that do transfer to other species. So yeah, they like the prairie dogs. So, okay, I'm gonna stop right here. So do you want to see this bird in action? There's no blood, there's no guts, no squirting, no screaming. You can't even see the animal, but you can see what it looks like when a Ferruginous hawk actually kills prey. It's very short. So if anybody doesn't want to see it, I'll just blow through this. All right, here we go. You're gonna go, wow, with all that, that's it? This is why I had to use the software because I needed the videos to be in there. So that's Quinn. You're going to meet her in a few minutes. See, told you that was short. Anybody want to know? Does anybody see what that was? I don't think anybody will cry over it, but it was a pack rat. And we know how much we all love pack rats. I mean, I don't mind them. I just don't like them in my car engine or in my ductwork. So I'm going to get into more of the personal side of this. This is Quinn. So I'm going to stop this. I'm trying to get more like in-depth personal on. I didn't want it to be academic because I changed this. So I didn't want it to be academic where it's just like, study subject. I needed you guys to be connected to this species so you can go out, look for it, care about it, because it is in trouble. And I'll get into that in a minute. So there's going to be a lot of personalization here. So that's Quinn. So the way Ferruginous hawks hunt is they're very comfortable on the ground. In fact, when I fly Quinn, she either sits on the glove or she's on the ground and she just hopscotches next to me when she's behaving. And if you want to see more about how she hunts, or I should say, I call her my bunny looker. 'Cause she just kind of like, oh, look, there's a bunny, Mom. Where's Coral? So, so they hunt very close to the ground. So when you live in the wide open prairie and you hunt prey, you got to wonder, how do they sneak up on it if they can see them? So what this species does, which is pretty ingenious really, and she does it, I have never seen this bird fly more than, I don't know, maybe 20 feet, and she almost always is within a 6 foot range. So what she does is she'll go real low to the ground, and they all do it. They hug the landscape, so they use the hills to hide behind. So they get real low. You don't see a lot of flapping. She's a big bird, and they're very, very quick. So I'm her 4th falconer, and when her falconer that gave her to me said, yeah, she's really quick. I'm like, yeah, okay. So the first time she left the glove, I was like, holy smokes, she can just, we call it speck out in very quick time. So they hug the ground. They don't do a lot of flapping. It's very quick. And then they just go over that hill, and it's like, surprise. And if they're going after a ground squirrel or a prairie dog, that's what they'll do, is they'll sneak up on them, and then they've got small feet, which I talk about in a minute, and they'll shove their feet down the hole, and that's how they do it. Yeah. So she does it to me all the time. She scares the bejeebies out of me. So she'll go and do whatever it is she does when I'm not watching. And this is when I'm free flying her. So she's free flown. I do use her for falconry as well as education. So all my birds are free flown. So when I'm flying her, she'll go off and do whatever she does. And then she'll real low to the ground. She'll sneak up behind me. And her favorite thing to do when she's bored is she'll smack me in the back of the head with her wing, and I will never hear her or know her, that it's like, how did you get over there? Or she'll like sneak up, and I'll go somewhere this way, and she'll be behind a bush. Yeah, so it's effective. So yep, very comfortable on the ground. That was what, and then I'm going to show this video of her actually flying, and you'll see her just kind of hugging the landscape. She was waiting for me to tie my shoe and got mad and left. So that's about as high as she ever gets. So there's the small feet. So this bird is very specifically designed for what they do in life. So if you're on the ground all the time, you've got to kill, you're going to be vulnerable, especially if you're in the wide open. And they tend to share the same habitat, not always, but a lot of the time, with golden eagles. And if this is the largest hawk, the golden eagle is probably the only real threat. So if you got a really, so it looks like she's smiling, right? So she's got a huge, it's called a gape, but it's her mouth. A lot of people call them frog mouths because she's got a huge mouth. So you need to eat really quick. Otherwise, when you're on the ground, birds are going to think that you're either, you've got to kill and they're going to take it from you, or there's something wrong with you and they want to kill and make a meal out of you. And that's actually happened to her. A couple of years ago, she was attacked by a female golden eagle. When she was on the ground, she was, doing her hopscotching, and she was back there, and I heard this whooshing noise, and we're in Sedona, and I thought it was her coming. So I went like this to give her the glove, and I see 2 large brown birds dueling them. Took me a few seconds to figure out what was happening. So couldn't really find a good photo of her feet that showed. So I tried to show like with me, so you can see the size of, and she's a big bird. She's nearly 5 pounds. So I weighed her this morning. She was 1625 grams. So that's a hair over 4 pounds. And she's on the lower end now. So they got small feet. So if you're chasing stuff, and the other thing that they'll do is they'll sit outside of a ground squirrel hole or a prairie dog hole and wait for the prairie dog to check the weather. And if you got big feet, that's hard to do. She's quick with those feet too. So even though they're technically small relative to her body size, they do a lot of damage. She's the only bird that I've had that's ever gone through my palm. I have 8. Oh, I've had, that would take a while to count, but I've been doing this for 20 years. But I have 8 now. Yeah. That, you know what? Somebody else asked me that question. I've never had that question up until then. You know what? I don't know. I'm sure there's an evolutionary reason for it. Why it's yellow, I don't know. I'm sure the answer's out there, but it's a good one. In some species, like my Saker falcon, when they're juveniles, and like red tails, when they're blue. The cere will, the waxy part that's up here, that's called a cere, will be blue when they're juveniles. And that could be for identification, but yeah, but some species don't do that. And she eats fast, and I mean fast. So she can swallow the back leg of a jackrabbit whole, cottontail head whole, and she's done all that. And then I remember the first time I ever fed her, it was a piece of rabbit about this big that would have taken my other birds like 15, 20 minutes to get through. She swallowed it so fast, I thought she dropped it. So I'm like looking for it, and she's just over there. So yeah, so I have to handle her very differently, because when you do birds like this, food can sometimes be a distraction, or why you have them under control. So when she's eating, I have to do everything very quickly before she runs out of food. I feed my birds every day. Now, she will tell you that she needs to eat like 20 times a day. This species, and this, especially her, they're all like that. It's all about the food. So a unique thing that this species does, which is good for them for survival, but it's irritating for people like me, is they will shut down their metabolism if they think they're going to go into hard times. So like, with the prairie dogs, I don't know if it's true hibernation, but they go underground and they go dormant. Well, so, rough times in the prairie, they will slow things down, especially when there's a cold snap. So when I'm bringing their weight down, and I'll explain that when I get her out. No, I don't starve her. But, and then like the last 2 seasons, we had a very early freeze, and then, I was also bringing her weight down. She shut her metabolism down real quick, and it took me probably 2 months longer to get her. So yeah, it's a good thing for them in the wild, but kind of annoying for a falconer. And she's not starving. She never sees hard times, ever. Not sure. She's a princess. So they come in different colors. So this is my friend Devin. That's her female, who is much smaller. She's actually the size of a male, in my opinion. So males can go to 900 grams. This bird is, I think she said, was like 1,100 grams. I thought maybe she might have been a male, but they DNA'd her. And then Quinn, she's a dark morph. So the species as a whole is quite rare, but 3% of the population are dark morph, and I've only seen 2 in the wild. And as far as I know, I'm the only one that has a dark morph in captivity. Now, someone probably does, but not that I know of. So, come from? So she was born in the wild. So I'm her 4th falconer, and she was born somewhere in the middle of May in 2014. So her first falconer, 2 guys from Iowa. I don't know a whole lot about her first 2 or 3 years, but trapped her and her sister. So it's north of Salt Lake City. The nest collapsed. I mean, they went out there to trap a bird, but this just had, wind blew the nest down. And so they pulled the 2 females at 3 weeks old, which is legal for falconers to use for falconry. And they rebuilt the nest and put the other 3 babies in there. From what I understand, both parents were dark morphs, and all 5 clutch mates were dark morph. So it runs in the family. And then her sister now lives in Oklahoma. So that's where she came from. So she's perfectly healthy. She is non-releasable because she's a hard imprint. So she doesn't recognize herself as a dangerous Ferruginous hawk that kills stuff. I don't know what she thinks she is, but a princess. That's what I think she thinks she is. She's very dramatic, very diva, very demanding. I mean, she's a good girl. Sure.
You said she weighs about 1,600 grams.
Mm-hmm.
You said this other light female weighs about 9 something.
No, she was I think about 1,100.
So are the dark morphs traditionally weighed? Are they bigger?
No, That's a good question, though. I mean, dark morphs, not necessarily. Dark morphs, the thing is, they think it's just the melon in the feathers. It's just, but I think there is some differences. Like, I don't know if there's differences in this species, but like a red tail, like a dark morph red tail, the dark red, they're weird. And, and they're all like that. So, I mean, there has to be a genetic reason for that. It's not just because, oh, look, I'm all brown, so I'm going to be weird, so she's 500 grams. So it could be, the size difference could be just a factor of where they're located. Like our red tails are quite small. You go to like Virginia or on the East Coast and they're ginormous. My first red tail was as big as she was, or almost. She was huge. But yeah, and this one, I believe her female came from somewhere in Colorado. So in the warmer part. So maybe that's why she was smaller. And some are just smaller. Could be, the nutrition they got in the nest. It could be genetics, could be, who knows? A little bit. So I'm gonna, oh, man, if you don't get that just right. Well, you'll see her when you see her, you'll see that she's more like a brown. Ooh, I'm good. She's more of like a brown. Now the ferruginous is Latin for the rust, so they are very rusty. She's more of like a brown. And the good way to see it, like when you see a normal ferruginous, they kind of look like a red tail. And the only way you can tell a difference is, so when a red tail's flying, they have the dark patagial marks. They don't have that. And then also when they pull their legs up to fly, they've got boots. So this is a booted species, which I'll show you her sexy boots in a minute. And they're red, hers are brown. When they pull them up, they make a red V. So if you see that red V, no patagial marks, you've got a ferruginous. Because sometimes you can get a really big red tail and you can't tell. So she likes to sleep in. So she sleeps in that. So she doesn't have perch. Remember I said that she had, so I'm just kind of go into her life. So, and how I manage her and what makes her unique and this species unique. So they've got small feet. So then they got this big body. And if you put them on a perch like a dowel or any perch really, they can get bumblefoot, which I don't know if anybody has chickens, you'll know what that is. But it's like their version of like a bed sore. So when they've got that heavy body on something that's maybe smooth or not real soft, that skin will start breaking down. And she does have a history of chronic bumblefoot when she was with the falconer before me. And then the girl loves to sunbathe. So that's what she's doing. And I looked up, I was doing some work on the deck and I look over and I was like, what are you doing? So she's sunbathing. She does it all the time. She even did it at Science in the Park, even though it was raining. So she gets out. When we were at the Grand Canyon, it was the first time she ever did it on the glove. She started doing all this weird stuff. And I had like hundreds of people. I'm like, God, what is she doing? I thought she was going to have a seizure or something. And then she's very silly. And then she's actually, it's a silly photo. I caught it just at the right time. I love that photo of her because she looks like such a dork. But actually what she was really doing is she was looking up. If you ever want to go birding, take one of these with you because you'll never miss anything. And she was hot. This was last year in September. So she was hot. It was just it's a funny photo. But yeah, they don't do well in the heat. And she does, well, if you think about it, they're in the prairie, so they like to sunbathe. Yeah, when she's laying down like that, it's usually in the during the molt. Sometimes I'll have to poke her to get up. I wouldn't be surprised, she might be laying down right now. So it's also, get the weight off her feet. That's a lot of weight on those little bitty feet. So now the bad news, this won't be fun, but we'll get through it. So, so these guys are in trouble. Okay, they are big enough. I didn't want the citations to get in the way, but there is evidence that they are declining. And some of these, they're of conservation concern, like in this state, because they don't know how they're doing. So they're very secretive, they're very difficult to study. And so, and for whatever reason, just like golden eagles up until like 5 years ago, they just haven't been a priority. So when I started my dissertation in 2011, here in Arizona, they knew nothing. I did my dissertation on golden eagles. I don't know if I said that. So in case you're wondering why I talk about them all the time, they knew nothing. They didn't know where they were, how they were doing, nothing. So this is kind of where now everybody's studying golden eagles. They're like the new thing. So now they're in this kind of position, and they're such a strange species, and a golden eagle I would not consider to be a specialist. They'll kind of do whatever they need to do. This species will not. And then in Canada, they're doing a whole lot worse. In I think it's Alberta. Did I put that up there? Alberta, they're actually considered endangered. So you can see how old some of these studies are. The Schmitz and Fife in 87, that's kind of like the foundation. That's where they all kind of bounce off of. And there, you can see there's not a whole lot of research going on. I noticed this one when I started looking at the literature, because I did want to get some academia in here, but she did her dissertation on the population in Wyoming, I think. And she's done a lot of work. So apparently the population index in Canada, there's only 1,200 pairs. That's not a lot. And they, just like golden eagles, they will not nest every year. So if the resources aren't there, meaning food, they just will choose not to nest. So if there's no resources, why would you have babies you can't feed?
Is that predation, disease, or habitat?
All of the above, which I'm going to get into. So I'm not going to read this, but it's just basically, I think I kind of said, yeah, okay. Yeah, they are endangered. And I think it was 1983 and 1990, the United States or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service submitted them for endangered to be listed. And they didn't feel like that they were warranted that. I'm not quite sure why, but maybe because there wasn't enough data. So I actually took, oh, for heaven's sakes. Yeah, I'm not doing this again. Anyway, we're almost there too.
We've got a question online that says, do you think they're declining more in Canada than the USA, or is Canada just doing a bit better at learning about them and seeing a decline in their data?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably a little bit of both. I think Canada is doing a better job finding out. They've been a species focus for quite some time. If I don't know the real answer to that question, this is just a guess. If I had to guess, it is because they're just looking. And maybe we'll find out. Okay, so I snagged this instead of remaking it. So this is actually Arizona's numbers. And so historical, not given. No, there's not a whole lot of data. So there's a reason for that. So they are a species of conservation concern. I know they have been on that concern list for a while. I don't know, because when I did my dissertation, I asked them if they wanted to do that, because I wanted to do this species as well, because I couldn't decide. And I was like, nah, they're good. But exactly, but they don't know. Actually, the answer I was given was they don't nest here. And I was like, yes, they do. So anyway, that's how they're doing. The short answer is we don't know. Hopefully they're doing well. So they think the species concern, habitat loss or degradation, which I would agree with, habitat or human disturbances, I would definitely agree with that, and climate change. So prairies, I think, are the most at-risk habitat out of all of them and the proper word is global environmental change, because we're not just changing our climate, we're changing our environment. So I covered all that. So that's the Arizona numbers. Basically, they don't know, and that's just lack of data. And they may be collecting it and they just haven't published it yet. This is 2020. So, you know, COVID did a lot of weird things. So this is a very long quote, but I wanted to make a point. So despite the historical changes in likely declines, so this is a paper dated in 2012, so that's 11 years ago, so that's some time. And there's insufficient data, but they said that they think that it might be either stable or increasing. Anybody can make that make sense? Make that make sense? So there's been a historical decline, there's no data, but they think it might be stable or increasing. So be very careful when you read this stuff. And I don't know if they meant to say it the way I'm taking it, but, and then you can see how old that is. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because if you do want to look at, you know, if you're looking to support conservation or you just are curious, you know, it's good to kind of look at these things like a detective. So this is actually I snagged these off of an old PowerPoint that I did when I first started my PhD. So this is the one study, and this was it was published in 87, but the research was done 70s, yeah, or 60s, so a long time ago. And so this is 20 years. So in 20 years, so that one I said was 1990, a lot can happen. So based on these things, they think that they might be doing okay, but there's a lot can happen in 20 years. This was Utah, I believe. Utah or Wyoming. Yeah, so 16 pairs go down to no pairs. And 50% within, what is that, 5 years?
That was the whole state or just an area?
Probably just an area. Back then you had to do, you know, I was lucky with my data. You got, you know, GIS, you've got, you know, machine learning algorithms and helicopters and things like that. They had to get out there and do that all on foot. I'm glad I wasn't a biologist back then. So I just wanted to point that out. So this is, you know, so what's really going on? Well, it's, you know, it's complicated. So these are all the potential threats, and I would agree with all of them. So whoever asked what the deal was, it probably, you know, that awesome answer people give, depends on, you know, where they're located, what the problem is. If I had to guess, here in northern Arizona, it's probably an overabundance of outdoor recreation that is disturbing them. If I had to guess, all those buggies that you see out there, all the squatters, the van lifers, don't get me started on that. They're decimating, because I'm out there all the time. They're decimating it. So yeah, and I've mentioned a few times, this species hates people. They are very, 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 very sensitive to human disturbance. So if you are wandering around in the middle of a prairie with a single tree in it, and you see a nest and you find them in it, give them a ton of space, because if you approach them and you do disturb them, the likelihood of them leaving the nest and never coming back with or without babies in it is high. So they'll just leave the babies. That's how weird they are.
Do you think there's super risk for human factors because they do that, they would go to the ground?
Well, you were going the right direction, yes. But for how many of us have ranches or know people that are ranchers and they have the prairie dogs and they get out there and they poison them? So you poison a prairie dog, what else are you poisoning? Rodenticide, that does a lot of damage. And it's not just this species, but because they target prairie dogs and ground squirrels, a lot of the ranchers don't like them, or they'll shoot at them and they'll maybe get some lead, but the animal survives or does die, and the rancher's just like, it's full of lead shot.
So from what I'm reading here, the issue with the wind farms is not that they're getting hit and dying by crashing anything, that you just displace it.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, if you've ever seen a wind farm being constructed, which we've got a lot of them here, it's a lot of construction. And then usually where there's high wind, these guys like to hunt because they like to soar. So it helps with their lift. I mean, they do get struck, but they're probably less likely because they do. And there's a lot of mitigation that helps with the strikes now. Is, you know, the blades are different. There's some things that are being created where they, and I don't watch this literature, but I've seen some of it because I do eagle surveys. I don't do them anymore on wind farms, where there's like a detection. So if it sees something, like the detection says, oh, large eagle, it'll shut down the turbine. So now when I did it, because I did one huge farm in Ocotillo, California, I was actually in a tower. So if I saw anything that was on the list, that I would call and they would shut everything down. And it's fast. As soon as I call it, just you can see it. And then the one at Dry Lake, I've only had to curtail once out there, but they do shut them down. So if that makes everybody feel better. But yeah, it's the other stuff that is the, you know, and I don't know if wind farms are really our answer, but I mean, fossil fuel isn't either. And wind and solar and all that technology is very new. So we have to give them time to figure this stuff out before we get all the, we had a protester at the one site every day. So it's like, you know, well, if you got it, why don't you come out here and figure it out? So somebody smarter than me needs to figure out how to solve our fuel problem. So yeah, you know, and you just, it's a whole bag of tricks, and it just depends on where they are, how this is impacting them, and what's going on. So that's why it just depends. If I had to guess, out of all of this, human disturbance is going to be number one. So yeah, they're weird. So let me see, we're getting into the fun stuff yet. So this is where they think the problems are in Arizona. And it's basically the same thing. I was a little surprised that the recreational was a threat was medium. I don't know if I'd buy that. 2020. And you know, these guys, I don't know who took the data, if it was Game and Fish. And I don't know who took, it was a collaborative thing. So I don't know exactly who the data collectors were, but livestock and farming. So here, it's probably people poisoning the prairie dogs, because I get phone calls all the time, including from Flagstaff school, high school. No, the district call. I've got a bunch of prairie dogs. Can you bring your bird down here? Because I don't want to poison them. Like, yeah. I was like, I would love to, but I can't fly her on Butler. She doesn't look both ways. She'll kill herself. Because she's a princess, so she expects traffic to stop. So, yep, I talked about that. So if you, and also, even if it's not impacting the birds directly, it can impact them indirectly. So this was from the same study. So, and this is with golden eagles and most raptors, but I'm just using the Ferruginous as an example. And remember, I said they don't nest every year. So the rabbit density or the prey density, based on what it is, impacts breeding. So when the rabbits or the prey is in a low cycle, the breeders of whatever species that is going to be in a low cycle. So if you mess with their food, then you've got a real problem. So it could be something like that. You can see how that data is really old. And there is a rabbit shortage for the first time since I was I've been a falconer, which is nearly 20 years. Game and Fish put a bag limit on cottontails.
That also, they have that.
Yeah, that wiped them. Like my, you know, oh, now we can have fun. And we talked about, wait for it. Security camera caught this. She's like, Mom. So she can be silly. She only does this when she thinks nobody's watching. So this is me putting on her transmitter. That's her. You can see how she's low to the ground every time. Hang on. That's the only time she's ever flown higher is because she was being a pain. And I was standing in a wash. Now the best part, I'm assuming you want to meet the actual bird. And I got to do my academic duty. What's that? Where did you see that? Oh, it wouldn't have been a Harris hawk. White with speckles?
And it didn't have the red tail. I can see he had some that it had.
Oh, it might be a juvenile. It might have been a juvenile red tail. It was creamy, not white, right? It was more creamy. Because there are no white ones with specks. No raptors that are white. I mean, not here. I mean, there's the deer falcon.
They're like roost on our dead tree, looking at our puppy.
You guys, yeah. So if you guys have outdoor cats, those are also not a good idea for not especially the little birds, but even these guys. So like a great horned owl, their favorite food is a skunk. So your cat would not be a problem. Small dogs. But even though, you know, the videos that you see of the eagle carrying the kid, I mean, they could kill the kid, but they're not going to carry it away. So you can still have a problem with your pets if they're small enough. I have to be careful with her, with my dogs, and they're 50 pounds now. She looks at them like, huh. And she broke the door. This is the second one she's broken the door. So when I fly, so you can see I free fly her. So I use weight management, which means that I'm using their natural history, their natural ecology, to gauge where her motivation is. So the only reason why she flies and comes back to me, as much as I would love to say that she loves me, and she does solicit me every spring, and I just tell her no, thank you. You know, it's really about the food. So that's where the reinforcer is, the food. Do they show affection or love or a bond? I think they do, but not like we do. She definitely favors me. She knows me over anybody else. But so I use weight management, and the weight is not that I starve her to a certain point, because I don't starve her. It's a number, so it's a human metric. Her weight tells me how hungry she is. So like when you're hungry and you're driving down the road on a road trip and you're hungry, like hungry enough to pull over at a nasty McDonald's or something, you're going to do that. But you're not starving to death. Otherwise you couldn't drive. But if you're not hungry, you're going to bypass the nasty McDonald's drive-through and go somewhere else or wait. So that's just where I get her to, is her motivation to go through that drive-through. And that's all the weight tells me. Just like you saw. So I take all this equipment off, and so she can choose to migrate or she can choose to come back.
You have a long line at the end that pulls back.
There is a training line called a creance. What I mean, a lot of education birds aren't free flown. They're just kept on a tether, is what I mean. So she's a captive bird that's free flown. That's unusual for a lot of captive birds. So Quinn, everyone, Quinn. She's like, yeah, okay, all right. And so just like I said, she wasn't laying down, she was waiting. Probably hoping we were at home and I was going to feed her. So that's where I make her bed every day, every night, and then she lays down. During molting season, she lays down a lot. So this is called a giant hood. So you see falconers that have falcons with the, hood on. Some people ask me if it's a crash helmet. I was like, well, they're going to need one if I fly her because it covers her eyes. So what a hood does is just keeps them calm, keeps them visual. I do not hood this bird because she doesn't like it. And it would not be worth putting one on. Probably would be all bloody and dramatic, and somebody would go to the emergency room and not her. So just like I said in the thing, big, huge mouth. She needs her beak trimmed, but she's the only bird I have that I actually take down to the vet and have her sedated so she forgets that I did anything mean to her. This is not a bird that I want upset at me. This species is very difficult to handle or deal with or train. They have a tendency to be quite aggressive, and they do have a temper. I was her 4th falconer and she was only 4 years old. So I've had her 6 years. She's not going anywhere. I'm not gonna transfer her. So she is where she belongs. But they are very, very, the patience you need is just, I have a lot of patience with my birds, but even she tests me. There's a video on YouTube where I'm throwing it the biggest tantrum ever. Because I have a GoPro. And so when I was editing the video, I was like, dang, that was 8 minutes long. So I was like, we'll have to edit that out. But anyway, very small feet, even though they're big. And so you can see her little boots. And because she's a princess, she's got, so all my birds have a color theme. Hers is pink because, you know, she's a princess. So she's got about 5 foot wingspan, and she's about 1,600 grams. She ate a mouse this morning for breakfast. So she asked how often I fly this bird. I fly all my birds. So what I was starting to say is they sleep in this every morning during falconry season or flying season, which is generally around September to March-ish, February-ish. I get them out, I weigh them every day, you know, that morning. If, you know, whoever's at weight goes back in there, goes in the car. If, you know, they had a really good meal and they're not, or for whatever reason, I'm not going to fly them, they go out for their day. Then they go in the car, and she's going to rouse. Good girl. So that's just like her going, like, you know, getting all sorted. So they know when they go in here and they go in the car and they feel the smooth road, and then, you know, they go in there for a while, depending on where we're going, and she hears this clunk, brrr, she'll start hitting the door, and she will not stop until I get her out. So you can't see her, but she's got a scar right there. Because one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to fly you when I want to. She's like, okay. And she beat on that thing, and I opened it up, like, I don't know, it was an hour or two later, and she had bloodied it. I was like, okay, you win. Yep. So she's a dark morph. I don't know if obviously you guys probably figured that out. So she's the only one that I have seen in captivity, and only go for it.
How long?
That's a good question too, because they are not in captivity a lot. You know, a lot of people don't have them. Red tails, you know, so they're a little bit bigger than a red tail. They live into their early 30s. Eagles can live in their 40s, even I think 50. There's like 52 is the highest. That's in captivity. So if I had to guess, it's probably somewhere in between there. So maybe the 40s. Now in the wild, you can half that, and that's best case scenario. And about 75% don't see their first birthday. So, and she would have been one of them had the falconers not come in. And nope, we can turn a little. Nope, her feelings would be hurt if you didn't want to look at her closely. Or no, that's a good question. So yes, because of her feet are small, does that hinder her hunting? I mean, obviously it is different how they hunt because it's used for reaching into holes, but I don't hunt ground squirrels. If I could find a really good field full of them, she loves the little bitty ones, which are kind of embarrassing for her to be so excited about. But no, they're pretty powerful. She may have, like, if it was big, maybe the reaching, but they do the job. What's that? Oh, no. He asked if I put chaps on her for squirrels. I don't hunt tree squirrels with her, but a ground squirrel, she certainly would need them. The only other bird that I have right now that I actually hunt squirrels on is my female rarest hawk. So squirrels are a very dangerous prey because they bite. and they could take off toes, sever tendons. They could do a lot of damage. So the male birds, and ladies, in the raptor world, females are larger and dominant. Males are smaller and not dominant. So the males are smaller, their toes are smaller. So it's just, now my male Harris hawk has caught a squirrel. I don't target them, but if they catch one, I can't stop it, but I don't target them. And then with red tails, females even, she's gonna poop. There we go. Good girl. So she asked when she does a kill, does she eat right there? If she was in the wild, she would eat right there. Some of them they can carry. So if it's like, you know, a mouse, so they can carry off about half their weight. So she could carry off something probably up to a cottontail if she had to, but they do, if it's a bigger prey, they'll eat right there. Now, when my birds catch something, I do what's called a fair trade. So let's pretend that you actually caught a rabbit. And so she'll catch it. And like you saw there, I go up and I don't let them eat the kills that they just do because I want to look, you know, for parasites, lead shot, anything else that could be. I've had a chipmunk. This is when we were in New England, full of the decon, the blue poison. So, so I have like the back leg of a cottontail that I've already gone through, and I'll put it over. And I also feed her only on a lure, which I don't have a video of that. But it basically, a lure for her is just a stuffed toy rabbit. And so I'll tie her meal to that. I don't feed her on the glove because she does get really aggressive. So when you feed them on the glove, they have a tendency to be more aggressive, or what we call sticky footed. So like the new Harris hawk I have right now, he's very sticky footed. So he's not aggressive, but I'm prying him off my glove all the time. So there's a lot of tools that we use.
Packaging.
Absolutely.
Everything up, and thank you all so much.
And if you have any more questions or you want to know any more, there's a lot more there.